Hi, my name is John Green. You're watching Crash Course World History, and today we're going to talk about India, which is hard because A, I only have 10 minutes. Mr. Green, I don't have time for you today, me from the past. B, when we study history, we tend to study unified polities that we can label, like the Roman Empire, or China, or Beliebers. And this emphasis on unity tends to C, lead to labels that mask a lot of historical difference, like for instance Europe, which is such a weird and nebulous word that we don't even know what it means. Plus D, no offense Europe, but there are not many histories more complex than India. And E, a lot of what we know about Indian history comes from British historians who both used and embodied the phrase historical bias. All of which F makes it very unfortunate that we only have 10 minutes, but we will do our best. Okay, we're gonna make this like Voldemort's soul and split it up into 8 parts. Part 1, the Vedas. So as you no doubt remember, the Indus River Valley was one of the earliest cradles of civilization. But that original civilization basically disappeared sometime after 1750 BCE. Then there was a long period of Aryan migration, and by Aryans we do not mean like prehistoric Nazis. We mean people from the Caucasus who migrated down to the can you, Stan, can you just spell it for me? Thank you. We know about these Aryans primarily because they left behind religious texts, the earliest of which is called the Vedas. The Vedas are also the earliest texts of what will come to be known as Hinduism, although it wasn't known as Hinduism then, and they're responsible for tons of stuff, but we only have 10 minutes, so let's just cut to part 2, the caste system. The caste system is one of India's most enduring and fascinating institutions. Let us read from one of the Vedas about Purusha, the universe-pervading spirit. When they divided Purusha, in how many different portions did they arrange him? What became of his mouth? What of his 2 arms? What were his 2 thighs and his 2 feet called? His mouth became the Brahmin, his 2 arms were made into the Kshatriya, his 2 thighs the Vaisyas, from his 2 feet the Shudra was born. So this section gives a divine explanation for the caste system. Brahmins, who as Purusha's mouth speak to the gods, were at the top. Kshatriyas from Purusha's arm became the warriors, as you no doubt know if you've ever attended my gun show. Vaisyas, the merchants and artisans who provide money for the priests and the warriors, came from Purusha's thighs, because everybody knows the thighs are the money makers, and the Shudras are at the bottom. They're the feet, the laborers and the farmers who are the foundation of the social order. Also, the rest of us stand on them. The caste system becomes much more complicated than this, but that basic division into 4 classes remains throughout much of Indian history. In spite of the efforts of many reformers we'll be meeting in future episodes of Crash Course, the caste system is the foundation for another big concept in Hinduism, Part 3, Dharma. Dharma is basically one's role in life and society, and it is defined primarily by birth and by caste. The whole idea is explained nicely in this passage from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is talking to the warrior Arjuna. Having regard to your own duty also, you ought not to falter, for there is nothing better for a Kshatriya than a righteous battle. The Bhagavad Gita is a section of a much larger epic poem called the Mahabharata, which basically tells the complicated and long story of a war between 2 kingdoms. And we can really see how important Dharma is in this passage, because Krishna is basically telling Arjuna that because he is a warrior, a Kshatriya, he must fight. Even if he's bad at it, like for instance if he gets killed, it's still preferable to not living his dharma. It's better to be a bad warrior if you're a Kshatriya than to be the world's best baker. Basically, you're better off fulfilling your own dharma poorly than doing someone else's well. That leads us to part 4, samsara, moksha, and karma. There are both personal and social reasons for doing your dharma. Right, the social reason is obvious. Dharma and caste combine for excellent social cohesion. You get the exact right number of bakers and the exact right number of warriors. We could stand to implement this system in the United States, actually, where everyone knows we suffer from a shortage of electrical engineers and a surplus of people who want to be on reality TV shows. That would never happen in ancient India. But say that your dharma is to scoop animal dung your entire life. Why do you keep doing that when you see other lives that at least appear to be far more fulfilling? That leads us to the concept of samsara, or the cycle of rebirth, often called reincarnation. The basic idea is that when you die, your soul is transferred to another living thing as it is being born. And if you fulfill your dharma, things improve and you get reborn into a higher being. You don't have to scoop elephant dung anymore. But the ultimate goal is not to be reborn as a Brahmin. The ultimate goal is to be released from the merry-go-round altogether. And that release is called moksha. The law that holds all this together is karma, which is summarized really nicely in the Aranyaka Upanishad. The doer of good becomes good. The doer of evil becomes evil. One becomes virtuous by virtuous action. Bad by bad action. The Upanishads, by the way, are later religious texts that began as commentaries on the Vedas, but later became sacred writings in their own right. This is a really great way to organize a social order from top to bottom. Everyone has a role, and because their role has a religious dimension, society stays in balance. But as a religion, Hinduism has a problem, at least if you want to start an empire. Everyone's path to salvation is individual. The original Brahmins tried to set themselves up as political leaders, but Hinduism doesn't really place a premium on worshippers obeying their leaders. And if you are a leader trying to make your subjects listen to you, that's kind of a bummer, which brings us to part 5, Buddhism. We can't